There's so many business owners that I know that are trying to reverse that right now because they're known as the cheap agency and they can't get past 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, whatever it is.
Okay, Carrie Rose, let's get straight into it. So cash flow, especially I feel like this year, a lot of agencies or owners are struggling with it, dealing with it, and just having problems with it. What kind of issues have you guys faced with cash flow issues and how do you prevent them from happening?
I think that's an interesting question because I'm very lucky to be able to say I've never had cash flow issues, but I think I made some really sensible decisions in order for that to happen, right? I hate living in fear. That's one of my things, right? If anything scares me or puts me in a position of fear, I think I immediately try to solve it. And I think cash flow is one of the biggest things that hold businesses back because straight away the business owner lives in fear. They live in fear and be able to move on to the next month. So I guess what I basically did is I made 5 rules when I first started Rise. The first rule was go after enterprise. And the reason I did that is because I think a lot of startup agencies go after the startup brands, right? Because they're the small, nimble, teams that can go after the small, nimble brands and you can grow together and make money. But usually those startup brands have really bad cash flow problems themselves and they inject that into yours and they don't pay invoices on time. Whereas the enterprise businesses, they pay their invoices on time. They have a big finance team. And that's one of the biggest things that I knew straight away is we're not going after the small people. We're going after enterprise from day one and we can go after the scaling and, in the startups later on because I need invoices paid on time to make sure I don't have cash flow issues. So that was rule number 1 that I went for. Rule number 2 is charge the same as the big agencies. I think too many people start up their agencies thinking go cheap and undercut. And I think that's one of the worst business decisions people can make. I think people will be listening to this thinking, no, I've done really well by undercutting the big boys, right? But it will only get you so far. It will only get you so far. There's so many business owners that I know that are trying to reverse that right now because they're known as the cheap agency and they can't get past 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, whatever it is. So I think straight away I charge the same as the big agencies. And the reason why people came to me is because I was faster. I was more creative. I was better than them in those ways. The second one is invoice promptly. So that's simple. Get a really good finance team. And the rule is make sure you're invoicing within X amount of days and make sure it comes in. 12-month retainers only. So in year 1, I had 85% of everything we did was 12-month retainers. Very strict on that. I think a lot of business owners' problems is actually confidence problems. Confidence to say, no, it's 12 months only. Because they think, oh, well, they're going to leave. They won't. If they want you, they'll not go. They'll stay for 12 months. They'll sign a 12-month contract. And then the last one was keep 4 months running costs in the business at all times. 3 months is healthy. 3 months is really what they recommend, but I always go for 4 months. So I guess those are the 5 rules that I put in place. And as a result of it, I'm lucky to say I've never had cash flow issues. But I think it's because of some of the early decisions that I made, I guess, from day one.
Awesome. And Carrie, how do you because you guys experiment with a lot of things. How do you approach maybe experimental expenditure? So i.e. maybe it wasn't a big spend for you guys, but you threw a yacht party in San Diego and you guys are always just doing these like crazy things. How do you guys approach that?
So the way that I approach things like that, especially when it comes to you're not exactly sure exactly what's going to come back off it, right? You're probably not going to get leads straight away and, return. I put 10% of my revenue. So take my revenue number, do 10% of it for fun activities. And fun activities is there to build fame, awareness, word of mouth, mental availability. And because it does pay back in the end. And I think too many businesses focus on the attribution, like what is it we're going to do to make sure we get leads and all that sort of thing. Whereas that's my rule is 10% of our revenue I invest back into the business on a monthly basis to go and do those sort of things. And I think it's took some time because I've hired people at my MD and he's come in and said, it's not easy to attribute some of the things that you're doing. I said, the business is famous. We get inbound leads. We have big brands like the one we just talked about come to us. So that's the attribution. It does work.
Awesome. And Carrie, in terms of your agency life, what's the most expensive lesson that you've run into?
I was thinking about this because I think this is such a good question to ask. The most expensive lesson that I've learned running an agency is around senior people. And I'm going to tell you something. When you hire senior people, especially expensive ones that, 100, 200,000 a year kind of vibe, it's not about what they've done in their career. It's not about their experience and what they can bring to the table. It's about how they make you feel. And I actually did a LinkedIn status about this yesterday because you made me think about it. When you have an MD, an FD, a business partner, they're meant to make you feel secure, safe, free to go do the things you're good at. And if you don't feel those things, you should seriously consider their role in the business. Because really they're there to make you feel better, feel confident, etc. So I think I've kept people in my business because I love them, right? I like them as people, and I feel like, well, they've got 30 years experience doing this, so surely they're going to help me. But at the time I felt alone, I felt scared, I felt not secure. And I think it got to breaking point, and then I realized, shit, I'm not going to feel like this. And then that's when I realized this is a very expensive lesson to learn. I'm not meant to feel like this. So I think that's probably the one that I would say the most.
Awesome. And you mentioned senior people, and I know quite a lot of your team. They're all great people. They all love the company. Like, we've talked about this in depth. So have you made any hiring decisions you regret, and what advice would you give to avoid hiring mistakes?
Yes, I've made many hiring bad hiring decisions, and also ones that I regret. I think I'm going to be honest with you. There's an article, actually, if you Google Rise at 7 and Business Insider, I think it's on, and the Times, they wrote about how this agency has hired influential people to help scale their business, right? People with following, people with personal brands. I think most of them I've regretted. And I'm going to tell you why, is because a lot of them come into the business because through ego. They bring an ego to the business, and it's all about their following and attaching the Rise at 7 success to their brand. And they don't realize the hard work it takes to build a successful business. You got to drop their ego, and including myself. That's a lesson I've learned for myself, right? So I think I've made many hires in the past because I feel like they're going to bring 100,000 followers to my company, eyeballs, fame, noise. But if they're not bringing grit, tenacity, creativity, or commercial acumen, then really what are they bringing? So I think they're some of the things that I've regretted, is going after people with following and personal brands on LinkedIn and things like that. I think they're my biggest ones that I've regretted hiring.
Awesome. That's really interesting, because Neil Patel was on the Hrefs podcast recently, and that
Yeah.
was one of his tips for hiring, was actually the opposite. So what you said, he said that he goes after people with like big books of businesses, people that have relationships in those, let's say, those countries that they want to merge into and stuff. So it's interesting you say that.
Yeah, because I think there's a difference between people who have relationships. Because I've hired my CS director, right? She came into the business and she brought contracts, she brought business, and that is not her ego. That is, she's just very good at a job. Whereas a lot of people I've hired in the past, all they can bring is what they're saying on social media, their posts, their likes, their shares. And I think you quite realize the depth behind somebody is they can talk about what they do, but can they actually do it? And I think that finding the difference between those two people is so interesting. Listen, I'm going to admit I was one of those people. I was one of those people that built an ego, all about following on social media. But then I realized actually the ego needs to go. It's all about, well, what is that then impacting my business commercially, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. And sticking on the topic of hiring, so Ray, your head of marketing, told me to ask you about the story about how you hired Wes and met Carl.
Okay. So I'm hoping I'm going to answer what he wants me to answer. I'm like, what is he expecting me to say on this? So I guess the story about Wes, Wes is my social media director at Rise at 7. And Wes has ran his own agency before. He actually got awarded the best small social media agency of the year. So he's an entrepreneur in himself. He's worked in social media industry for 10 plus years. And when I approached him, or when he approached me, and we kind of went and had some drinks together, the interesting thing is I really emphasize the importance of people being aligned with how you think. So he's done many years in social and I've done many years in search. And he believed the way that search is going is the same as mine. So he believed that social media and search are starting to become intertwined, right? TikTok has started pulling Google results into their feed. I don't know if people are seeing it, but so has Google started putting TikTok into their feed. So it's becoming intertwined in that way. And I guess he was the first person that saw it and said, listen, I'm going to quit my job and join you because I believe what you believe in. And I think having business alignment in that way of where the future is going is so important. So I think, that's really key. And I guess the one with Carl, so Carl's an interesting one because a lot of people talk to me about Carl and said, you need to meet this guy. And I was like, okay. So I booked in to go for some dinner with him at Soho House, my favorite place. And when I was sat with Carl, it was the first time I've met with someone where I had my phone out and my notes, and I was like, hold up, slow down, say that again. And I was writing down everything he said. And I was like, this is the first time in such a long time that I've actually met somebody that's teaching me something new. And I was everything he said, I was like, fuck me, I hadn't thought about it in that way. And I made a joke and said, what job? Because everything you've just told me, I'm like writing it all down because I want to go and implement it in the business. And I didn't have the money to be able to afford him, right? It was just a winged thing. But he said, yeah, well, there's a reason why I'm here. He says, I see you guys and I feel like I can bring a lot to the table. So anyway, yeah, I hired him and he's paid for himself. Like he's come in and completely transformed my business. So I think one of the things that I would say is like, I have a rule now since I met Carl is hire people that teach you something new. If they're not teaching you something new, don't hire them. Yeah.
Do you know what I love the analogy when it comes to hiring is I see so many people playing checkers when it comes to hiring. So they try and find somebody that looks very similar to them
I
and it
agree.
just never works out. But if you hire chess pieces with all their unique strategies and different things to teach the board, then you're going to win.
Massive. I'll tell you a little bit of a business story about that. So when I was first starting my agency, I wanted a business partner. And obviously one of my best friends who I've worked with for 11 years is Will Hobson. And he was obviously one of the people that I was like, yeah, I'd love to join a business and start a business with him. But I knew he could do the things I could do. And I could do the things he could do. So I knew if I had a rainy day, we'd be buggered. We'd be like, oh shit, like how could we solve it? Because he can't do the things I can't do, right? So I knew the person that I needed to start a business with was the complete opposite to me. So my original co-founder when I started Rise at 7, if you lined us up together, we literally are the opposite people. Personality, skill set, like everything, we're completely the opposite. You wouldn't have put us together, but that's what helped me succeed, is because he could do the things I couldn't, and he could answer questions that I couldn't, and he had the knowledge that I don't have. So I think that is key, definitely, with business owners. When people are thinking, should I get a number two? I think that's key as well.
Quick pause. If you're getting value from this conversation about scaling agencies and hiring top talent, I want to share something that might help you. Are you struggling to find A players for your digital marketing agency? We've got you covered. For SEO experts who turn rankings into revenue, head to SEOforhire.co. For paid media specialists who boost your bottom line, check out paidmediajobs.com. And if you're looking for foot rubs, you're definitely in the wrong podcast. All right, let's jump back into the episode. Awesome. And you mentioned Will, who's now the director over in the US, right?
Yeah.
We had Harry Sanders on recently, and they've just opened an office in Atlanta. We were kind of discussing breaking into the US market. So what's been the realities of that? Because you've got this beautiful New York office, like everything looks nice, fairy lights around Christmas. But has there been any struggles building that business in the US?
Yes. The biggest struggles of building a business in the US is people don't realize how frigging big it is. And in the UK, it's very easy to get word of mouth and people talking about you and recommending you. But in the US, literally one state is bigger than most countries in Europe, right? Added together. So word of mouth and spreading your brand is a lot harder. And we did that very well. That's the thing that worked for us as a business in the UK. So I guess the way that we are approaching it is, rather than throwing so much money at brand awareness, it's all about how do we build connections with people? Because I think that's the thing actually that's weak in the industry, I think, right now, because of the pandemic and all that sort of thing. But I think is the thing that's so important in the US. One time I was on a phone call with a potential client and I listed some of the brands that we work with. And they said, oh, they named one of the brands. They said, who's your connection there? Because I know everyone there. And I was like, shit. So I was like, said their name. Yeah, I know him. I'm going to speak to them and get a review. The thing with the US, they pride themselves on relationships. They pride themselves on connections. And I think that's the thing that I was like, okay, in order for us to win here, we can't just be the one with the brand and the people that talk about on LinkedIn and the famous case studies. We need to go and build connections. So I guess what a lot of people don't do is invest in American people. Go and hire Americans with connections, with relationships, and really spend time there. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest learning curves that I've experienced, definitely, of America.
Yeah, I honestly, back to what we were chatting earlier about the whole ego thing. My ego took a massive hit when I went over to the US, like with the business, and we were like, oh, this is what we do, and they're like, oh, and then like I'm mentioning like some of our biggest clients, and they're like, no, never heard them. But you talked about their connections in real life. So again, like we've discussed this, the reason I want to go to Austin and do that month-long US trip every year is the first time I went to Austin, I sat down with one of our clients and we did a great job with them. And they're like, oh my God, you need to meet XYZ. And
Oh,
then it's just like a waterfall and waterfall. So if you do business well in America, it's like,
yeah.
it just trickles.
And that's what I think is my strength. Like, one of my strengths is I make friends easy. I could talk to anybody, right? And I think that's what does me really well in America, because people love to talk to me. I actually met with one of the CEOs of one of the biggest food delivery businesses in America. And he was straight away like talking in a cafe with me, getting along. And he's like, right, I've introduced you to this friend that I know. He owns this other business and it's doing 100 mil a year. And I'm like, oh my God. And like straight away, like he's building my network. So yeah, I think having a bit of a personality, ability to talk is so key in America, because what thing they will do is they'll recommend you on, they'll help you build your network. It's the most valuable part of America.
Awesome. And again, let's go back onto connections in real life. You mentioned the whole pandemic and stuff. Like one thing you see Rise at 7 do is you do masterminds, like private events, you do the Soho House, you do all of that. I don't really know if I need to ask, like, what's the thought process behind that? Because you've kind of answered that. But to other agencies that are maybe keeping everything on remote, like, oh, we don't need to, everything's on video call. Would you tell everybody that you need to meet them people face to face?
Massive. I think, it's the old age thing of people buy from people. I think retention of clients and staff retention is really high right now because of lack of relationships and connection. That's what I think is the problem. I think I read a stat the other day about agency retention of staff. The average tenure now is about 18 months, which is mental. Like my last agency, I stayed there for 5 years, 6 years. And the reason that people are going about is because the only thing that's important to them is, how can I get more money? Whereas when I used to work at my agency for 6 years, it was about connections. I was building an agency with my best friends. And I think connection and relationships is the thing that's causing a big problem in our industry. And I think the reason why we're winning is because that's what we've got. We do, when we do roundtables with our clients, I'm bringing all of my travel clients, Emirates, Park Dean Resorts, Travel Republic. They're all having dinners with each other because we're the facilitator of that. We're bringing our clients together. And I think that is more valuable than having a Zoom call. And, doing great work is the number one thing. But I think bringing a level of connection and relationship is so important. It's literally how agencies are built. Back in the day, we used to take clients to racehorsing and, private dinners and stuff like that. And I don't think agency life is like that anymore, but I think we still need an element of connection. And I think that's the best way to do it.
I love that. And Carrie, what's one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you started Rise?
Good question. I put a lot of pressure on myself to know everything. And I thought that's where success comes from, right? You have to know everything about everything, every part of your business. You have to be the 100% person to know about everything. But success doesn't come from knowledge and skills necessarily. I think it comes from mental health. I think the strongest people with the strongest mental health are the ones that win. And I've definitely experienced that myself. So I think invested in mental health and, strength, they're the most successful businesses. I have done that in the last 12 months. So in order for me to get to the revenue targets that I want to hit, I knew I needed to lose weight. I needed to be confident about myself. I needed to feel safe and secure and all these different things. So I've spent a good 12 months focused on me, because I thought by putting my investment into me, my business is going to suffer for a bit, because you can only really, when you give so much to something, something's got to give, right? I thought by putting all my investment into me, my business is going to suffer. But actually, my business is the best it's ever been, because I'm the most confident and happiest I've ever been. So I think that's the lesson that I wish I kind of knew at the beginning, is look after yourself, because then you'll be fine.
Awesome. So, Carrie, we're going into 2025 soon. Rise of 7 are growing a lot. Let's say you're going into a meeting with your strategy team, your leadership team, and you're looking about growth avenues for 2025. What kind of topics are you talking about?
So there's two kind of things that I've been talking about with my strategy team. And one of them is, do we go up or do we go wide? And what I mean by that is, with our current clients, sorry, my dog is barking. With our current clients, that's the easiest way to grow, right? And actually, that's been proven to us in our last 12 months. Our biggest success has come from current client growth. I think we've added about 1.8 million on the top because of it, because our current clients have bought more from us. And the easiest way to do that is, do you go wide? So if somebody buys SEO from us, do we want them to also buy content and then social and PR? Or do we go up and go to the marketing directors or the CEOs, because they can obviously have bigger impact? So I think when it comes to relationships and do we go wide or up is one of the strategies that I've been thinking about. And when I say, what the reason you would go up to a marketing director is because you're not going to buy social and content. You're going to buy Europe. You're going to buy America. You're going to expand territories. And that's one of the things that we did in the last 12 months. So in the last 12 months, our biggest growth, especially in the US, is rather than going wide and going, hey, can we go speak to the social media manager and talk about our social media, case studies and skills? We've gone up, spoke to the marketing director and said, here's some work we do in the US. Can we win the US territory? And it's worked. So that's the kind of strategy that I would start with there. And then the second one is, what is our land and expand? I've been talking about this a lot on LinkedIn, actually, about land and expand. And I think not enough people kind of focusing on it as a business. So I guess what you need to do is, when you have your products, so say if you have 5 or 6 products that you're trying to push in the business, usually there is a land product. What is it that people buy from you first and they know about you, you're famous for it? And then what are your expand products that you're going to sell later on? And I think understanding that per territory. So I've got a land product in the UK and then expand product in the UK. Then I've got a land one in the US and then, et cetera, and in Europe and things like that. So I guess doing those two strategies of up or wide and land and expand are the two things that I would be speaking to my strategy team about.
Awesome. That's really interesting. Carrie, what's the hardest skill or knowledge area that you've had to master as an agency owner?
The hardest skill or part of my business that I've had to master is probably operations. Understanding how to run a good business. I think operations should be the secret behind the curtain thing that runs your company. But I think often it's presented as the front thing that is the most important thing about a business. And I think understanding things like, well, what does good look like? Like, how do we get stuff done faster, more efficient? How do we actually run a project to make 80% margin on? Or, what utilization should we have everybody at? I think those sort of skills and understanding of knowledge, I guess, around operations is the thing that I've found the hardest to crack, because so many businesses and agencies do it a different way. Like if you speak to a web development agency, it's run in a completely different way to a service-based business like SEO or social. So I think they're probably the hardest things that I've struggled with to learn myself, because I'm a creative, right? You're either a creative person or an operational person. So I guess I've needed to, number one, figure out the importance of it in a business, and I'm definitely there now. But then also, well, what numbers should I care about? Which ones is actually just noise? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's very interesting because, again, it's something I struggled with starting the business. And we had James Brockbank on recently, and he was talking about phases that the companies go through, where it's like, right, you need to stop thinking about just growth and like fix internal processes to build the next one. Yeah. And yeah, it's something that when I first started, like everything was all about bringing clients in, sending invoices, and then moving on to the next one, and not just internally trying to improve processes?
Yeah. Do you know what? One of the things I was going to share with you today is too many people focus on things that aren't working. And I did that recently. I went and met a coach that I have, and I basically was like listing out all the things that weren't working in my business, and these are the things that I need to fix, blah, blah. And he said, let me just stop you there. What is working in your business? And I said, I guess this is working. This is working. He said, I need you to fuck all that stuff off. You know, the stuff that ain't working, don't worry about it. He says, too many people think about too much the things that aren't working and don't focus on the things that are, and 10 times that. And I was like, yeah, you're so right. So I pulled a list of the things that we do really well, and I just honed down on it, doubled down on it, and it's worked. And I think that's what you need. You know, I could get swamped in the things that I've broke, right? But actually I should really put a rocket behind the things that aren't broke.
I love that. That's one of the things Charlie Munger always talks about, is just focus, focus, focus.
Yeah.
Okay, last question I've got for you, Carrie, is Ray wanted me to ask you about the purple cow.
Okay. So the purple cow theory is one that comes from advertising, and I'm going to tell you how I applied that to my own business when it comes to Rise to Seven's proposition. So the purple cow theory is quite simple. They say when you're driving down the road, maybe you're on the way to work and you see a field of cows, right? You very rarely look at a field of cows and go, oh, look, there's a field of cows. But if one day you was driving along and in that field of cows was a purple cow, you're going to pull up. You're going to stop and pull up in your truck, probably get your phone out, take a picture, and you're going to go, fuck me, there's a purple cow in that field. And I guess what that is capturing the essence of standing out and being different. And I guess if you line up SEO agencies in the industry right now, I bet none of them look like a purple cow. They all look the same. And it's very similar to the red ocean and blue ocean strategy. They all look the same. My goal in every day that I wake up is to be that purple cow. I want to look different every single time we're lined up against SEO agencies, social media agencies, digital PR agencies. I want us to be that, you know, what's that word we call it? Where you call it like wild card. That's it. I want to be the wild card. I want to look different. Because there's that theory, is it better to be better or is it better to be different? And it's always better to be different, because what you do is you steal mental availability. What happens is a bit of science. So I studied psychology. That's what I did in my education, psychology. I love people. I love brains. And what happens is, if you look like the same as everybody else, what happens is, so say if there's 10 agencies in SEO and you are one of those 10, what you've got is 10% share of someone's brain. Whereas when you do something different and you're saying something different, you're acting different, what happens is the brain buckets things. So it'll bucket everybody that looks like that over here and everybody that looks like that over here. And all of a sudden, I've no longer got 10% of someone's brain, I've got 50%. Because I've been bucketed over here in the 50% part of the brain. So you own more mental availability share by being different. So that's ultimately the strategy that I have. So every time I talk on stage, every time I'm at a conference, every time I'm at a pitch, even down to the way I look on social media, I'm always trying to be different. And I always put that in everything that I do. And you'll notice it in some of the things, the way I talk and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the purple cow theory. And that's why I think Right 7 is working. And my job as a CEO, I don't run the business anymore. My job is to keep us ahead every single time and making us look different. So I'm always thinking, you know, there's people starting to talk like us. I was at a conference the other day and someone's slide deck was pretty much like a copy and paste of mine. And I was like, I'm going to have to start changing this up now. But that's my job. My job is to see which way the wind is blowing, right? And yeah, it's time to change again. So you'll see it come in the next couple of weeks, and all of a sudden Carrie's thought about something new. But that's the purple cow. That's the purple cow theory.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you very much for coming on, Carrie. I'll put all your links in the show notes below.
Thank you.
Perfect. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that video and got some kind of value from it. If you did, please make sure to leave a comment in the comment section and let me know any feedback that you have for future videos. And of course, hit that subscribe button, because we will be releasing videos every single week. So you're going to want to stick around. Thank you, and see you in the next one.